It was a Saturday, and I actually had a Saturday off. I was taking care of a bunch of chores, and I was getting my truck tuned up and getting a haircut and doing all that type of thing. And my BlackBerry and my cell phone both started buzzing, which is never a good thing. But I looked at it, it was just a report from the State Emergency Operations Center that we get all the time, and it said there's been a mudslide up in Snohomish County. The folks in the state EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, didn't really fully understand, none of us did, how bad this disaster really was. Up until the point that it got dark, the first responders were so busy just trying to pull people out that they didn't really have time to stop and put out a message to everybody about what the situation really was like on the ground. Helicopter pilots that were flying people out didn't even take the time to get on the radio to put out a call to anybody else about what they were seeing because they were just concentrated on the mission. But we started getting an inkling that things were worse than what we thought. And I was on the phone talking to the State Patrol captain who was on the scene up there at Oso, and he couldn't even tell us how bad it was. All he could see were some trees and some mud that had come down blocking Highway 530, but he had no idea of the extent and what lay beyond that mudslide. To have it really hit home, it didn't occur until really Sunday morning when Governor Inslee and I and some other folks on his cabinet, we flew up in the State Patrol aircraft and actually went over the landslide area itself before we landed. I was just stunned at the size of the landslide. I can't even begin to describe the mud, but I mean, our guys were sinking up to their chins in this stuff, and it was very dangerous. So just total devastation and destruction down there. When a disaster happens, there's so much confusion. Sometimes it's really hard to figure out exactly what you're dealing with in the initial few minutes of a disaster. There's an assumption that we're like supermen, that we just show up and handle whatever the problem is, and we've got all the technology we need, and we just get out there and blammo, problem solved. And it's really not that way. I mean, communication doesn't work the way we would really like to have it work. People are communicating through a hodgepodge of mechanisms, tablets, cell phones, radios, you know, whatever they have that works. But without that shared understanding across the enterprise that responds to disasters, everybody is just kind of taking their best shot at what they think the problem is and what they think the solution is. It's similar to the old game of telephone you used to play as a kid. You know, somebody will start with a message, and by the time it gets around the whole ring of kids, it's an entirely different message. That still occurs today with situational awareness because we don't have the data and the pictures and the graphics and the full understanding of what the situation is. We're really sometimes going just off a radio call or a telephone call, trying to figure out and basically read into what has been spoken to us to get our hands around what a situation really is. Having FirstNet at the beginning of a disaster like that, the first responders on the ground up there rescuing people would have had the capability to send data back to the state EOC, which would have allowed us to see the magnitude of that landslide well in advance of the governor and I flying over in an airplane. Anybody who's going to play in that disaster, having that shared understanding and knowing where all of the other responders are and what they're bringing is just going to be so helpful and improve our ability. And so that's the revolutionary change that I think that FirstNet is going to bring, and I'm pretty excited about it.